based on race, ethnicity, gender, and other protected classes among municipal employees. As the Council's data team has noted in their report, city agencies have largely succeeded in ensuring that employees of all genders and races are paid the same similar salaries within the same titles. But that does not mean that our work is done. The analysis conducted by the data team based on employee data from 2021 continues to show that overall, the city's workforce still exhibits substantial gaps in pay between men and women and between white and non-white employees. This is largely caused by a high concentration of women and racial minorities in titles that are lower paid, while managerial titles with better pay have higher concentrations of white and male employees. In addition, the data suggests that overall headcount reductions during and after the height of the COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affected women of color. Agencies with higher concentrations of women and employees of color saw substantial reductions in staff, while agencies with higher concentrations of men and white employees saw a relatively stable headcount. These findings demonstrate a long-standing trend of women and non-white employees being undervalued and underpaid. The Council is committed to improving access to opportunities for the recruitment, retention, and promotion of women and people of color to strengthen our city's diverse workforce and set a high standard for cities across the country. In addition to today's oversight topic, we will be hearing the following legislation to enhance promotional opportunities and diversify well-paid titles. Intro 743, sponsored by myself, which would require DCAS to offer career and counseling to long-term municipal employees so that they are aware of the many opportunities for upward mobility within civil service. Intro 767, sponsored by Councilmember Crystal Hudson, which would require DCAS to distribute a workplace culture survey to all municipal employees and then submit a report that summarizes the findings for each agency, so that we can identify issues within workplace cultures that may not otherwise be captured by the data we already collect. Intro 809, also sponsored by myself, which would require DCAS to report on its decision-making process for expanding eligibility for promotional exams to fill vacant managerial positions. Intro 828, sponsored by Chair Lewis, which would require DCAS and CUNY to distribute information about the civil service process and related CUNY courses and programs to students. Intro 829, also sponsored by Chair Lewis, which would require DCAS to engage in public outreach to promote civil service examinations throughout the city. And finally, Resolution 346A, which is sponsored by myself, which would call upon DCAS to consider an employee's participation in agency-provided trainings and other extracurricular initiatives when scoring promotional exams. I'd like to thank the committee staff for their work in preparing for this hearing, Policy Analyst Elizabeth Arts, Legislative Counsel Ria Yasawara. I'd also like to thank my staff, Chief of Staff James Burke, Kiana Diaz, and Freinet Familia. I would also like to give a special thanks to the Council's data team, including Rose Martinez, Ala Mazawi, Melissa Nunez, Eric Kopke, Reese Hirota, for all their hard work on this year's pay disparity report. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Farah Lewis, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair De La Rosa. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Councilmember Farah Lewis, and I chair the Committee on Women and Gender Equity. First, I want to thank my colleagues, chairs of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor and the Committee on Civil and Human Rights, Council Members Carmen De La Rosa and Councilmember Nantasha Williams, for organizing this hearing today, an important hearing to address the pay equities in the municipal workforce. For far too long, the city has struggled with both gender and racial economic equity. The council has attempted to address this issue throughout the years, including by passing legislation to focus on remedying these problems on the municipal level. In this effort, I introduced and the City Council enacted Local Law 29 of 2023, which sought to expand the information available to the City Council to help our continued work in this area. However, the Council's report on the city's progress on pay equity released this past week shows that there is still more work to be done. As Chair De La Rosa mentioned, this edition of the report continues to show that occupational segregation remains a serious issue in our municipal workforce and that women of color, once again, are disproportionately impacted by this disparity. The report found that pay disparities in the municipal workforce are heavily attributed to the fact that women of color are concentrated in particularly low-paying roles. For every dollar earned by white male employees, all other workers earn an average of 82 cents. Of this pay gap, white female employees account for 13.1%, non-white male employees 31.5%, and non-white female employees 55.4%. Non-white workers earn 84 cents for every dollar earned by white workers, with non-white male employees accounting for 32.4% and non-white female employees accounting for 67.6% of this gap. I know that was a lot of numbers. Female employees earn 84 cents for every dollar earned by male employees, with white female employees accounting for 15%, for non-white female employees 85% of the pay gap. The committees look forward to hearing from the administration the work that's being done to address these vast disparities and what more can be done on the council side to make sure that we fill these gaps. I also look forward to hearing from members of the administration about two pieces of legislation that are being heard at this hearing, Intro 828 and Intro 829, relating to careers in civil service for CUNY students, as well as relating to the promotion of civil service examinations, both of which could help efforts to promote diversity in the city's workforce. I would like to thank members of the administration, the Department of Administrative Services, the advocates, and members of the public who have joined us today. I would also like to thank members of my staff, Daniel Heredia, Shona Duncan, and Jamelyn Aileen, as well as our committee staff, as well as committee counsel Sahar Mozami and senior legislative policy analyst Christy Dreyer for their work on this hearing. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Chair Williams for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natasha Williams, and I serve as Chair to the Committee on Civil and Human Rights. I also want to start by thanking my colleagues, Chair Lewis and Chair De La Rosa, for organizing this important hearing today. First and foremost, I want to echo my colleagues in saying that the continued pay gaps and occupational segregation within our municipal workforce are unacceptable. The city is obligated to fix these inequities, and I look forward to hearing from the administration today about the work that remains to achieve this goal. I won't repeat what my colleagues have said, but I do want to draw attention to the fact that the pay disparity report at the center of this hearing is not the only evidence we have of inequities affecting city employees. Reports from the Equal Employment Practices Commission, or EEPC for short, which audits every city agency on a 4-year cycle, identify similar trends as this year's pay disparity example. I'm lying. Pay disparity report, flip the back. For example, the EEPC has repeatedly found that significant occupational segregation occurs between and within agencies, and that agencies and job titles where male and white employees are overrepresented tend to have higher pay. In contrast, agencies and roles where women and people of color are overrepresented tend to have lower pay, even where those roles require higher levels of education or experience. The EEPC has also identified disproportionate headcount reductions in agencies primarily staffed by women and people of color. What's more, the agencies that underhire women and people of color also have higher attrition rates for those groups, which further compounds inequities within the city's workforce. These trends date back to at least 2019, before the pandemic. I look forward today to hearing more about how EEPC's findings can complement and deepen our understanding of the pay disparity report's findings and about our current or planned efforts to address these egregious, longstanding inequities. In addition, while the pay disparity report only includes data for workers employed directly by the city, a discussion of the city's responsibilities for pay equity is not complete with mentioning the large number of contractors who perform work for the city. While the city does not directly determine employment terms for city contractors, the city budget does make sector-specific allocations and can determine contractors' pay increases for cost of living adjustments. These contractors perform a wide range of work on behalf of city government, For example, an estimated 90% of human services programming, including critical and court-mandated services, are provided by the nonprofit sector under contracts with the city. What we know about these contracts suggests that the same pay disparities and occupational segregation that we see as city agencies are replicated or even amplified among contractors. Current and future efforts from city government, including the EEPC, the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice, and the Pay Equity Cabinet, must keep the holistic impact of city policies in mind as they work with agencies towards making the city a more equitable place to work and live. Finally, before we begin, I would like to thank my staff, Amira Badi, Whitney Mozak, Nader, as well as committee staff for the Committee on Civil and Human Rights, Jessica and WM, for their hard work in preparing today's hearing. I also want to reiterate my colleagues' appreciation for the Council's data team for putting together the pay disparity report that is subject of today's hearing. Now I'll turn it back to Chair De La Rosa.
Thank you, chairs. I would also like to recognize that we've been joined by council members Menin, Bachar, Salam, Salamanca, and Caban, and online by council members Moya and Feliz. I now invite the representatives from DCAS, MOERJ, OLR to offer their testimony. We ask Deputy Commissioners Katrina Porter, Sylvia Montblanc, Commissioner Saida Sherman, and Deputy Commissioner Dan Pollock to come up to the witness table, which you already beat me to that, first to deliver their testimony and answer council member questions. Then we will ask representatives from EEPC to come up to the witness table and answer our questions as a second panel. I now turn to the committee council to administer the oath for this panel of administration officials, including Caden Outer, I'm messing up your name, hopefully not, sorry, and Sanford Cohen, who are present in the chamber for Q&A.
We will now hear testimony from the administration. Before we begin, I'll administer the affirmation. Panelists, please raise your right hand, as well as those who are present for Q&A. I'll read the affirmation once and then call on each of you individually to respond. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Porter. You please begin.
Good afternoon, Chair De La Rosa, Williams, and Lewis, and members of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, Civil and Human Rights, and Women and Gender Equity. I am Katrina Porter, the city's Chief Human Capital Officer and Deputy Commissioner for Human Capital at the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, commonly known as DCAS. I'm joined today by my colleagues Sylvia Montalban, DCAS Chief Citywide Equity and Inclusion Officer, Deputy Commissioner Dan Pollock, First Deputy Commissioner at the Office of Labor Relations, and Sadia Sherman, Chief Equity Officer and Commissioner at the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice. I'd like to first begin by thanking you for this opportunity to discuss pay equity in the municipal workforce, a matter that I am deeply invested in improving. Equity is at the forefront of the work we do at DCAS to better serve all New Yorkers. This is true of the way we think about addressing pay disparities among our municipal workforce and the strategies we employ to help close the gap. As a Black woman who has charted my entire career in city government, I am keenly aware of the challenges that have created barriers to advancement and have limited earnings for some based on their race or gender. Despite witnessing past inequities firsthand, I am fortunate to be involved in the efforts to revolutionize and reimagine the municipal workforce every day. Our vision has never been clearer, and we view our work from a lens that magnifies equity. Our agency is committed to providing opportunities for all New Yorkers and leveling the playing field through the civil service process. Since we last testified on this matter, the city has made significant progress to diversify our talent pools, increase equity and access, and remove barriers to municipal employment including through the ongoing review of our minimum qualification requirements. In June 2023, we supplemented the bachelor's degree requirement for certain job titles. To date, we have completed our review of 23 entry-level titles with the potential to impact 20,000 jobs and expand eligibility for civil service positions that were previously restricted and made difficult for many applicants to meet minimum qualification requirements. With an updated review, the city is now more inclusive and equitable, focusing on relevant work experience and practical skills rather than formal education. We are also building the foundation to expand and review to eventually include supervisory and discretionary positions and titles where we've historically seen the greatest pay gaps. Moreover, last year, we spearheaded the innovative and impactful New York City government hiring hall model to help fortify our workforce. With 16 New York City government hiring halls held, we touched every corner of the 5 boroughs and yielded more than 2,000 same-day job offers. Today, of the 2,000 job offers, the city has onboarded 1,540 candidates, and there are over 1,325 still working at agencies citywide. Collectively, these efforts have helped us better position the City of New York as both an employer of choice and an employer of opportunity for all New Yorkers, truly reflecting the diversity of the city we serve. As we continue to focus on strengthening our workforce, increasing diversity, and creating new opportunities, we are also cognizant of the challenges posed by historic and systematic inequities as it relates to occupational segregation and pay equity. We have shown continued intentionality in revamping our approach and thinking innovatively about weaving equity into all aspects of recruitment and workforce development and training. This includes working to address occupational segregation by enhancing recruitment for a more diverse pool of titles and EEO job categories that are highly paid but predominantly white or male. The Council's most recent published pay disparities report shows there have been strides in minimizing the pay gap. Compared to the first report, Black employee salaries have improved by 9% compared to white employees. Our Hispanic and Latino colleagues have improved 7%, and our Asian employees have also improved their salaries by 7%. Based on these numbers, it is evident that there are major shifts happening, and the tireless efforts that we have been making to promote municipal employment in every corner of the city has been yielding tangible results. Our first line of defense has and will continue to be our civil service system. By design, it prioritizes merit and fitness and mitigates issues with pay inequity. Furthermore, the salaries for the vast majority of employees are set through collective bargaining between the city, represented by the Office of Labor Relations, and unions representing our city's workforce. So our employees themselves have a seat at the table through their union representation. In addition to utilizing our civil service system to increase equity, we've also been laser focused on bolstering diversity. In fiscal year 22, the cumulative representation of historically marginalized groups among new hires exceeded those who self-identify as white in all job categories. The number also tells a story of advancement in the workplace for women. Among new hires, female appointments exceed the appointments in more job categories than previously reported, including administrative support, officials and administrators, professionals and paraprofessionals, This also should suggest that we are actively remedying the impacts of occupational segregation as women have been hired in the categories of protected services fields that are typically male-dominated but are diversifying. We recognize that inclusive recruitment and targeted outreach to marginalized groups is a vital part of increasing diversity and access. With that in mind, we continue to focus on creating opportunities and sharing resources for those interested in municipal employment through DCAS's Office of Citywide Recruitment, or OCR. In fiscal year 23, OCR participated in over 209 outreach events and reached nearly 26,000 participants, sharing widely the benefit of city employment and promoting pathways into civil service for New Yorkers. OCR's recruitment efforts also target students enrolled at colleges and universities, including promoting and disseminating information about internships and fellowship opportunities like our Civil Service Pathway Fellowship, which is the Civil Service Pathway Fellowship, a DCAS and City of New York partnership, is a 2-year fellowship that provides recent CUNY graduates with pathways to permanent civil service employment. With all of the efforts in mind, we are confident that the work we're doing makes our city's workforce more equitable, starting from recruiting through career training, development, and advancement. As such, we value the council's input and welcome discussions related to the proposed legislation being considered today. It is important to highlight that we have already set into motion a number of initiatives and strategies whose goals are reflected in some of your bills. And so I'll go into our position around a few of your bills. Intro to 743, we agree in spirit with the bill and want to highlight that the city has employed similar strategies in municipal government for many years now. Across agencies, citywide, career counseling is already offered to employees. In considering the intricacies and logistics of career counseling, we wish to remind the council that hiring and promotions occur at the agency level. Thus, DCAS insight into the full breadth of opportunities and paths to advancement is limited and beyond the scope of our purview. Considering that there are over 300,000 total city employees, the type of resources that would be needed to centralize career counseling through DCAS as prescribed by the language in the legislation would be significant and frankly impractical. That said, we welcome a future dialogue with the council about how we can make the existing career counseling process work better to equitably uplift and empower our city's workforce. Intro to 767, similarly, Intro to 767 seeks to gain insight on city employee experiences in the workforce that we have been actively working to gather. DCAS is constantly checking the pulse of the fellow agencies on what they need to help retain and improve employee engagement and satisfaction. We think there is an opportunity to harmonize this bill with our latest efforts to achieve these shared goals and welcome future discussions with council about the best way to mend that work together. Intro to 809, DCAS has serious operational concerns about this bill and seeks a future discussion with the council to better understand its intent in proposing this legislation and the goals it is designed to achieve. Aside from our view that any prospective implementation of this measure would be impractical, the data that would need to cull to produce an annual report, as this bill prescribes, lies beyond the scope of our current resources. Additionally, DCAS wants to take an opportunity to briefly acknowledge the 2 other bills being considered by the council here today, Intros 829 and 828 and 829. Unfortunately, we will not be able to comment on these measures given the recent inclusion to the agenda for this hearing, thus not affording us an opportunity to review the language and prepare commentary on them. In conclusion, we thank the council for its ongoing commitment to increasing pay equity and improving the city's municipal workforce. Having fellow partners in government provides us with an appropriate channel to cross-pollinate and reimagine the city's workforce to best serve all New Yorkers. As reflected by this hearing, combating disparities based on race, ethnicity, and/or gender and occupational segregation is indeed an all-hands-on-deck issue. As you have heard from our testimony, DCAS undertakes many initiatives and offers many pathways to address inequities in pay, and we will continue to do so in close coordination and collaboration with our fellow agencies and the council. Please know that our continued pursuit for equal opportunity and equity for all New Yorkers is reflected in the work we do every day. Thanks again, and at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Porter. I want to recognize we've been joined by Councilmember Gutierrez. I also want to say that although you've testified that you will not be commenting on both intros 828 and 829, this panel and this council intends to ask the questions on the record. CUNY is a pathway for the workforce in our city. It is our public university system, and within your purview of making sure that there are pathways to employment for our graduating students, it is absolutely appropriate to ask about this, as well as public outreach, which is a part of the mandate of the agency. So we will be asking our questions, and we hope that, if you don't have answers today, we will certainly get answers back from you in short order.
Understood.
I'm going to start my questioning by directing you all to the screen here, to my right. On the screen is a bar chart that's showing the percentage of workers receiving salaries below the midpoint of their salary band. A salary band is the range between minimum and maximum salaries that an employee in a given title makes. The first bar to the left in light gray is the citywide percentage, with 47% of workers making below the midpoint of their salary band. Next to it is a set of bars with the percentages by gender who are making below the midpoint of their salary band. Female workers are in orange at 56%, and male workers are shown in dark gray at 41%. The last set of bars are the percentages by race and ethnicity. Employees who identify as Asian, Black, Hispanic, Latino, and other are depicted in the orange, and between 49 and 54% are making below their salary band's midpoint, compared to 36% of white workers who are depicted in the dark gray. As you can see, the data and analysis found that across the municipal workforce, female employees are significantly more likely to receive salaries below that midpoint of their salary band when compared to their male counterparts. Similarly, salaries for non-white employees are much more likely to fall below the midpoint of their salary band. How are pay and salary bands determined in this case, and what is the administration's explanation as to why so many women and people of color are disproportionately falling below their band's midpoint even after controlling for work experience?
So I'll start off by saying that, as you may know, approximately 95% of the titles in the city's portfolio, the salary bands and ranges are determined through collective bargaining. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague who may be able to shed more light.
Can you just repeat that real quick? I apologize.
No problem. So I was explaining that the majority, almost 90% of the titles in the city's portfolio, the salaries and the salary ranges are determined through collective bargaining. So I want to turn it over to my colleague, Dan.
Thank you for that question, Chair De La Rosa. So salary bands are set in collective bargaining agreements. We have differences. Some collective bargaining agreements establish a set salary rate for a title. Some establish different rates based on years of service. And some establish a minimum and a maximum salary, as well as often a rate that's applicable to new hires. So, I'm not sure whether this data relates only to where there's a minimum and a maximum, or if it also includes where there are set salaries based on years of service. So, I think I couldn't speak fully on it without knowing kind of exactly what went into it. In terms of how salaries are determined, if it's set by the collective bargaining agreement, then it's set by that. In the event there is a minimum and a maximum, that's set by the agency, including through a process with the Office of Management and Budget that all kind of personnel actions need to go through.
Can you speak to the process?
I'm not the best person to speak to it fully, but essentially when there's any type of personnel action, it's reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget. The agency, makes a request for the personnel action, and it's reviewed by OMB.
And then in terms of the explanation as to why so many women and people of color are falling below the midpoints after controlling for work experience?
So, like I said, I'm not sure I could answer that without kind of getting more into the data and what it includes, what it doesn't include. I don't have an answer for that at this time.
We welcome a response back to the committee, and if the response includes, we have to talk to OMB, if you could help us, try and get some information from OMB on this issue. I think this really speaks to the heart of the council's findings here, which are showing that women and women of color, workers of color, are falling disproportionately below. So it's important for us as a council to really understand not only the process, understanding and respecting collective bargaining, but understanding how those processes work and why this specific sector of workers in the city are disproportionately falling below. It's important for us to understand.
Understood, Council Member. We'll get back to you.
Thank you. We're going to change up our agenda for right now because we know that MORJ has to step away, is our understanding. So we're going to skip over to the questions and then for MOERJ, and then go back to some charts that have been put forth for our chairs to ask questions on those. So the first question for MOERJ, alphabet soup today, is improved language accessibility for current and prospective civil service employees. Are you aware of any civil service positions that would not require fluency in English? And are exams and written, this is both for DCAS and OMRJ, and are exams and written educational outreach materials translated? If so, what are the most common languages in your experience?
So I actually will defer to DCAS on that, and they can speak to the covered languages. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair De La Rosa. So most of our, all of our documentation is disseminated in English. You asked about civil service exams, and so those documentation, they're only disseminated in English.
The positions that require fluency in English. Are you aware of any civil service positions that do not require fluency in English?
So what I will say is that there are some civil service titles that require you to be fluent in certain languages. For example, there may be like an interpreter, bilingual, or an interpreter that may need to have proficiency in, a certain language.
Do you know, like percentage-wise, how many titles or the percentage of titles that require fluency in English? Is it like a majority of the titles?
Yes, the majority of our titles require that you understand and be understood in English.
Okay, and do you know the opposite, how many don't require that?
I don't, but I can,
Okay.
I can look into it.
Okay, and then obviously the educational materials, are they translated into other languages?
They are not.
They're not. Is there a reason for that?
I don't have an answer for that, but I can definitely circle back.
I wonder,
don't know the reason why.
do those materials not fall under the mandate of the 7 major languages of, the city should be putting out outreach materials for?
I'm sorry. Can Sandy can I have?
Yes,
Sandy
he's been sworn in, so he can answer questions. The question is, since most of your educational outreach materials is in English, as Deputy Commissioner has testified, do those materials not fall under the city's mandate of the 7 major languages that should be translated into the 7 major languages of the city?
Well, my understanding is that we translate many of our documents into the languages that are required under the administrative code.
I'm specifically asking about exam. So educational exam, like prep materials,
We
or?
don't create any prep
Okay.
materials for our exams.
Okay,
So the basic rule is that all city employees need to be able to communicate and understand English. Because as government employees, they need to be able to take instructions in English and communicate with the public. So that's the bottom line rule that's been in existence for.
well, even if someone can speak English, sometimes we think in other languages. I am, a Spanish speaker, native Spanish speaker, right? So I learned Spanish, and then I learned English. And so sometimes I think in Spanish. And so when we see questions, for example, you're preparing for a test, you can see it in Spanish and translate it in your head into English. And so my question is, as a study guide, as documents that are necessary for workers to study, are they available in a worker's native language?
DCAS does not produce any materials that are study guides for civil service exams.
Who produces the materials?
Pardon me?
Who produces the study materials for civil service exams?
Those are private enterprises that provide the study materials. It's not DCAS.
So
or
there-
any city agency.
So there's no type of resources or, you know, anything that can help a worker that is not predominantly English speaking, even though they may be able to communicate and speak and understand English to prepare for an exam.
Not that DCAS produces.
And don't we think that that might hinder some minority groups from being able to move forward in their careers if there isn't materials in those languages?
I don't know whether it hinders them or not, but there is the basic rule that people need to be able to understand and communicate in English.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the question. I know you're answering it from a more technical perspective, but I will say that it sounds a lot like learn English, we're in America. That is not the case of our city. That is not the case of our workforce. That is not the case when we're trying to have a workforce that is reflective of our city population. And so I'm looking forward to engaging with the administration on how we can make this process a little easier. Because if a person can't fully comprehend what they're studying, and we know people learn in different ways, it's very difficult for them to be able to take a test, even if they're taking it in English, and pass that test. And comprehension is important in order for us to have, you know, folks pass and move forward in this system. I think you wanted to add.
Yes, I just wanted to add, excuse me, that the notice of exam that's issued in preparation for an exam, it's a very detailed document, and it does give, you know, interested candidates an opportunity and insight into what will be on the examination. So it's very detailed. It'll give them a subject area and a brief description of what that area may cover. And so usually, you know, candidates will use that, you know, to study for the right.
How long is that document?
It's a very long document, and it contains a lot of valuable information to the candidate to help them prepare for the exam. So it talks about, you know, the roles and responsibilities of the job, like what to expect if you're in the title, the salary, you know, the eligible titles, the subject areas that will be tested during the exam.
In
So it's
your
quite
experience, do you think that DCAS would have the capacity to maybe work with another agency or a sister agency, a partner agency, to translate some of those materials that you already have available to other languages?
I think it's worth a further discussion, but I wouldn't want to commit to anything.
Okay,
You know,
I'm gonna pass it to my fellow chairs just because I know that we're short on time. We'll come back to this. Thank you.
You got it.
Those are great questions, and I just want to highlight, being a daughter of Haitian immigrants, you could learn a language because you need to communicate and be able to navigate getting around different settings that you're a part of, but it doesn't mean that it's a part of you. So the literacy component is important. So thank you, Chair De La Rosa. I have a quick question, two quick questions. Your mandate includes establishing standards for data disaggregation, including related to race and gender. Such standards may also include income and socioeconomic status. What patterns has this agency identified, including with respect to wage and occupational segregation, based on the city's pay equity reporting data? And then the second question is, what has the agency identified in the pay equity reporting to address the bridging gaps that you've seen in the reports? You've highlighted some of it in your statement, but it would be great to understand what that is.
Yes, so I think the greatest tool that we can employ right now to better understand the occupational segregation issue through the city is to identify the vendor to, you know, complete the study. And so that's been our main focus, is on identifying that vendor so that we can actually look at the data from a title to title perspective, which is, you know, the main focus here is occupational segregation. And so we think once we identify that vendor, we'll have a better idea of where we need to focus.
And how do you identify the vendor?
So this is mandated through Local Law 27. And so we've recently reissued a request for quote to, to identify an outside expert to conduct the analysis. We're expecting responses from these vendors by the end of April, and hopefully we'll have a vendor selected soon enough.
And have you all also considered the inequities with paid sick leave, parental leave, and other forms of leave that might be important in these conversations?
I'm not sure. I would have to. Dan?
Yeah, in terms of leave benefits, those benefits are obviously negotiated. Most civilian employees have similar leave benefits as laid out in the citywide collective bargaining agreement. But, we're always, discussing with our unions issues of leave, including paid family leave, which many of our unions have opted into the state program.
Thank you. If MOERJ could answer the same question.
Regarding what data are we seeing?
Paid leave, any type of leave.
Sure. So, I mean, that's probably a better question for our colleagues at OLR. But just to speak to the point that DC Porter raised earlier, our office and our role in this, right, is really through our partnership with DCAS and the Pay Equity Cabinet. The work that we're pursuing is the job evaluation study, which would also meet compliance with Local Law 27, that offers an opportunity for the city to look at comparable worth across titles where we see concentration of women and people of color. It also offers an opportunity for us to understand compensation within the same title. So to the slide that Chairwoman De La Rosa shared earlier, right, that would help us dig in further and really understand what's causing the disparity there. This is the first time the city has pursued this. This would be one of the largest studies in any municipal city. And so we look forward to sharing our report with the council members as DC Porter shared. We have a solicitation out. We hope to have that closed by the end of the month. We'll bring vendors on, and the first report would help us analyze at least 50 to 60 titles in this way.
Thank you. We look forward to that report. And the last question, in 2023, the Pay Equity Cabinet issued a request for proposals to identify a minority and women-owned business enterprise vendor to complete a pay equity analysis of approximately 60 job titles throughout city government. Is this the same RFP as the one required by Local Law 27 to conduct a comparative worth analysis?
Yes. So, and just to give some context, the cabinet had began to pursue a job evaluation study. At the same time, the council was proposing similar legislation, so there was an opportunity for alignment, and so that allows us to pursue that study and fulfill the local law compliance.
And is this the only RFP being issued by the Pay Equity Analysis?
So this is being issued through DCAS, who's co-chair of the cabinet, and this is the only RFP at this time.
All right, thank you. I'll hand it over to Chair Williams.
Thank you. Hello, Commissioner. Your mandate, which you are in the early stages of developing and implementing, we know that your office is fairly new, includes giving support to all agencies to develop policies and practices that combat wage and occupational segregation and promoting equitable hiring practices. What do you foresee being the key pillars of your strategy as it relates to combating wage and occupational segregation?
Sure. So, as you know, Chair, we have a number of new mandates by virtue of the 2022 election, which also includes supporting agencies to produce their first ever racial equity plans. We are going through that process as we speak, and we've designed that process in a way where we're asking agencies to focus on the core pillars of government, right? How they allocate their budget, how they hire and staff their organizations, how they design their programs, et cetera. And so our goal is, in addition to the many efforts of DCAS, in addition to the work of the Pay Equity Cabinet, individual agency work will also take place through these plans. And so we're providing that guidance as part of the overall planning process, and they certainly would have access to these types of reports, right, to make assessments in their own organizations.
Thank you. Section 3402 of the Charter, as added by Local Law 121 of 2022, states that the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity has the duty to develop initiatives and policies to increase racial equity within agencies. How has this task force been doing that, and can you please give some examples of the task force's work?
Sure. So for context, the task force grew out of the pandemic. It was convened during the pandemic, brought leaders of color together, also helped spark what became the Pay Equity Cabinet. In this administration, as we've moved past at least the earlier waves of the pandemic, our focus has been on bringing the task force together to concentrate on the Bronx in particular, right? So originally the task force identified 33 neighborhoods that were most impacted by COVID. Many of those communities were concentrated in the Bronx. And so that's the work that the task force has been doing. We, over 2022 and part of 2023, we had working groups within government to identify strategies to address some of the disparities we see in the borough. Earlier this year, we kicked off engagement across the borough, so we've had workshops within the Bronx, in-language workshops in Spanish. We have a youth workshop coming up where we're engaging communities to identify those strategies, and then we would move forward with a response plan that's addressing some of the issues that we see there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Williams. I know time is up, but I want to just ask you a quick question. Section 3403 of the Charter, as added by Local Law 121 of 2022, states that the mayor and their administration must issue a biannual citywide racial equity plan with the goal of eliminating racial equity. According to the Charter, the citywide racial equity plan is due tomorrow, April 26th, and should be made available to the public and submitted to both the Speaker and the Council and to the Commission on Racial Equity. Does MOERJ have any involvement in the development of this plan? And if not, is anyone in the mayor's office working with you all on this? Do we know if it's on track to be released by tomorrow?
Sure. So we're leading that planning effort.
Okay.
And based on the timeline that our office was established, our timeline for releasing the report was moved. And so we shared that publicly, and we'll make sure that that's on our website. And we also are working with the Commission on Racial Equity, who is our accountability body, to make sure that we're exchanging information as we go through that process. So agencies have received a briefing, we have kickoff training, and we look forward to keeping the council apprised.
And what's the new timeline? Do you have a date?
So the new timeline is to have a preliminary plan by the fall that would be shared with the public, and then we would move towards a final plan by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question. As of March 2024, only 8 of the 38 budgeted positions for MOERJ were filled. Have you made any progress in filling vacancies, and what are the challenges associated with having so many positions remain vacant? What recruitment steps have you taken to address this issue?
Sure. So, my number one priority is recruitment, and obviously we've, have established a new office in a challenging recruitment environment. I'm happy to share that our pipeline is filling up. We certainly, we've brought on some new people just within the last 2 weeks. We have some new people starting as well. We're looking for a number of equity planning managers who will be working with agencies. It's a very particular skill set, certainly, and we want to make sure we get it right. And so we've been advertising those roles, and fortunately we have some candidates in the pipeline.
Great. I want to just check real quick if anyone has any other questions because they are stepping away. We will send you the rest of our questions, and if you could help us by getting some answers back to the committee, that would be great.
Absolutely.
It's good to see you. Thank you for coming.
You.
We're going to go back into our questions of the rest of the admin team that's here, and I know that there's some graphics for Chair Lewis and Chair Williams.
All right, so if you could turn your attention again to the screen, there's a bar chart showing the percent change of agency headcount before and after the peak of COVID. The agencies with headcount decreases are in red. This, I don't think is this the right chart? Yes. Okay. are in red, while those with increases are in blue. The agencies are ordered with those on top having the largest reductions in headcount. This year's pay equity analysis indicated that the COVID-19 crisis disproportionately affected female employees of color. As we can see from this graphic from 2019 to 2021, agencies with predominantly female and or non-white employees such as the Department of Human Services, the Human Resources Department, and the Department of Social Services, as well as the Department of Probation and the Department of Education experienced substantial reductions in headcount. In particular, DHS experienced an almost 19% decrease. In contrast, agencies with predominantly male and or white employees like NYPD, DSNY, and DOT maintain relatively stable headcounts with decreases below 5%. And in fact, the Fire Department and the Parks and Recreation Department, ACS, and the Office of Technology and Innovation increased staff headcount. As we look at this data and note the disproportionate impact that headcount reductions have had on women of color in the municipal workforce, we would like to know what steps DCAS and the Mayor's Pay Equity Cabinet have taken to address the recruitment and retention of female employees of color.
Thank you so much for that question. So what I can say is that one of DCAS's missions is to provide support to city agencies to help them retain and attract top talent. During 2023, DCAS embarked on the Hiring Hall initiative, which was directly to support agency hiring needs because the city's vacancy rate was at a high level. And so through that effort, we coordinated with the agencies to bring them in and to actually bring the candidates to them in the communities that we serve. And as I mentioned in my testimony, we were able to reach about 14,000 New Yorkers who were interested in available positions, of which 2,000 received job offers. And a number of those employees are still with city government, which may have affected the vacancy rates for these agencies. What I also want to state is that DCAS, we do not have insight into agencies' vacancy rates. Hiring is decentralized and it happens at the agency level. So beyond, support through hiring halls or through our Office of Citywide Recruitment, we wouldn't have any information beyond that. Sylvia?
Yeah, I want to say I appreciate that response. Just a question though, like DCAS, are you responsible for trainings, right? Yes. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page. And are you responsible for looking at attrition rates in agencies? Like I know you say you don't have access to what those vacancy numbers are, but do you have the capacity to provide any levels of oversight around some of these agencies when you're seeing certain trends like the one depicted on the screen now?
So, Chair Williams, if I could complement something of what our Deputy Commissioner Porter said first, and we can also answer your question. I did want to point out that we also, in DCAS, in addition to what Deputy Commissioner Porter said, is that we also take other proactive steps to inform agencies about their workforce statistics and their ability and their utilization data in particular, so that they can be cognizant of where they have those underrepresented areas for women and people of color and in what job groupings. They're actually advised to review this information on a quarterly basis with lead stakeholders within their agency, that is the EO office, or agency heads, human resources professionals, and so that they could actively utilize that data to inform those recruitment efforts that they really should be using to target those populations that are affecting their retention rates and vacancy rates.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So in terms of like retention, because I do appreciate what you said, Commissioner, around like the hiring. I know the mayor's office is having another hiring hall on Monday in my district, and I know that the administration has been aggressive, and appreciate the administration working to really fill a lot of these vacancies, but more so retrospectively looking at like retention practices. So if you do see, in which I know data can be skewed, right? Because I'm looking at Department of Corrections. Like we know there were tons of departures for reasons that are very specific to the pandemic, and it just so happens that workforce is also has a high population of women and people of color. But just in terms of like the actual retention practices, is there anything that DCAS is doing or can do to try to address the reasonings behind why you see these departures in these particular agencies? Like what might be happening within that agency that is affecting the departure?
So, yes, I mean, there's a series of things that DCAS tries to employ and advise agencies to do, and it can be anything from engaging focus groups as well of different types of cohorts of agencies to also have a discussion to determine what factors may be driving the decisions for people to separate or move on from agencies. As you correctly alluded to, though, the pandemic had a big impact on our workforce overall and drastically changed our workforce landscape. However, there are other factors that obviously we can assess through many tools, such as focus groups and other types of surveying, which I'm sure you wanted to discuss at some point as well. And I can get into, I know you had other questions, so maybe I'll turn it over to Commissioner Porter, because I know you had other questions.
No, I think I'll just turn it over to Chair Lewis, but would be interested in the data. I guess it seems to be qualitative, if it's focus groups and or any quantitative data by way of surveys, to just understand what you are seeing and hearing and how your agency is working to create or reframe certain retention practices. So just, I'm more so interested in like the details of it. So I look forward to talking to you about it after.
You did allude to training, and you know that I'm sure you know is associated with professional development opportunities for employees, and we work very hard to see how we can curate the training portfolio at DCAS so that there are adequate training courses for individuals to advance. In addition, I just wanted to say that we employ a lot of measures as well in guiding agencies about their recruitment and hiring practices. For example, in alignment with Executive Order 21, Local Law 67, we've ensured that agencies not inquire about salary histories, right, in order to level the playing field, to determine how people are compensated fairly based on qualifications and the requirements of the job. We also obviously employ a broad sense of outreach and work with agencies, again, to strategize their recruitment efforts for very hard to recruit titles. I'd be very glad to get into that. I know that you're short on time, but if you ask me later, I can certainly elaborate.
Thank you.
On the screen is a figure displaying pay gaps between gender and racial ethnic groups and the percent of change in this gap from 2018 to 2021. The bar of the white male reference group is of the length $1. The bar of Hispanic Latino men depicts 95 cents, which is an improvement of 4.7% from 2018. The bar for white female employees depicts 91 cents, an improvement of 6.2%. The bar of Asian men depicts 90 cents, an improvement of 3.7%. The bar for men identifying as being some other race depicts 84 cents, an improvement of 9% from 2018. Following that, the bar of Asian female employees depicts 83 cents, an improvement of 3.8%. The bar for black male employees depicts 81 cents, which signifies an improvement of 5.9%. The bar for female employees identified as being some other race depicts 69 cents, an improvement of 3.8% from 2018 to 2021. The bar for Hispanic Latino female employees depicted 68 cents, an improvement of 3.3%. And finally, the bar for Black female employees depicted 68 cents, showing the smallest improvement of 3%. According to the pay equity report findings, pay disparities are largely attributed to the low pay of non-white female employees in the municipal workforce. Non-white female employees are concentrated in particularly low-paying roles, even relative to white female employees and non-white male employees. As we see in this graph, for every dollar earned by white male employees, all other workers earn an average of only 82 cents. Does the administration have proposals and ideas to diversify higher paid senior roles? And what more can the administration do to rectify this issue?
So thank you for that. As I stated, the administration is committed to addressing, pay gaps and disparities across the city. And we've been doing many things to address this. I would just go back to the efforts that we're undertaking around minimum qualification requirements, expanding, access to city jobs. I would also like to highlight our partnership with CUNY, the Civil Service Pathway Fellowship. It's a two-year fellowship for CUNY grads, which will allow them a seamless entry into civil service. And what else are we doing? We have many different programs going on, but those are the two most impactful ones that we're dealing with right now. And then just going back to that evaluation of the data, the pay equity data, will help us focus our efforts to better address this.
And I just want to say, if you guys agree to all of our bills, it'll help your numbers too. But go ahead.
Sylvia, do you want to add?
Sure. I just wanted to add also, we have a tool, which is the salary benchmarking tool. And that also has, we've shared it with agencies, so it allows them to as well use the tool when they're considering how to make these job offers with the minimum, mean, median, and maximum salary of certain salaries within certain job groupings. So that helps them to, level the data, compare the salary information against other agencies of a similar size and function. And that brings a little bit more consistency to how they're able to assess and make fair job offers. So we've, tried to provide a lot of guidance as well around their interviewing and structured interviewing and consistency and how they approach and assess candidates that way as well. Also the way that they interview people in making sure that questions are consistent among the groups of applicants for those positions. And also they're given guidance on how to indicate in their annual EEO plans how they have tried to develop and implement protocols for in-title promotions and salary increases. They're required to include justifications about their promotions. Obviously, that's a practice in general. And they're advised to review on a regular basis the demographics of those who receive promotions and to share the information in the aggregate with their agency head and human resources. They want to see what barriers there are for selection and promotion. So just want you to know that we're offering that kind of guidance.
I have a quick follow-up to that. Based on the responses we received during today's hearing, when looking at these trends, does DCAS have any data on the casualty of trends, whether that is through exit interviews, through agencies, and with DCAS efforts to reduce attrition amongst EEO groups such as women and people of color, helped by mandating these agencies providing data to DCAS. So would you guys be able to provide that? It sounds a lot like what Chair Williams mentioned earlier, but it would be good to highlight that further.
Yes, we do deploy exit survey. We will be deploying an exit survey through Local Law 130, so we're in the process of collecting data from agencies so that we can put together the survey for a release during the beginning of fiscal year 25. Right. So we should have more data soon.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Chair De La Rosa.
Thank you. We want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Joseph, and Councilmember Marte was here as well earlier. So I do want to, and I apologize if we're asking questions kind of all over the place at this point, but I do want to go back to Local Law 18 of 2019. In May 2021, DCAS issued recommendations for the development and implementation of pay, employment, and retention equity plans. The Mayor's Office of Data Analytics found that white male employees usually hold lower titles in a series, such as staff analyst or trainee, for shorter periods of time compared to people of color or female employees. DCAS pledged that within the year, they would continue to work with the Office of Data Analytics to produce a thorough progression analysis that would allow the city to understand and address roadblocks to career progression. What is the status of the analysis? And can DCAS share findings with us at this time?
Okay, so compliance with local law 18 is among one of DCAS's priorities with regards to understanding pay equity, and we do work very closely with ODA to analyze data, and we also, share data with them for them to conduct their analysis. So for this year, we provided ODA with the required data in February, and we're actually awaiting ODA's analysis of that data, which is usually available around May. Once we receive that data, then DCAS will analyze it, and then we can provide you data at that point.
Great, thank you so much. We look forward to looking at that. And does DCAS believe that offering career counseling services to advise employees of dead-end titles or promotional opportunities will help Black female employees advance in the workforce? And I know you testified that this is already kind of done across agencies, but is this something we believe will help move the needle?
Absolutely. We totally agree that career counseling is a valuable tool to help employees understand their trajectory. However, as the bill is written, putting the onus on DCAS to administer those career counsel sessions is just not feasible at this time. But once again, we're absolutely open to having further discussions on how we can figure out the best way to provide city employees with those services.
Great. I want to ask about the Civil Service Ambassador Program, which was a bill that we passed in collaboration last term. The agency reported that in 2023, it participated in 86 in-person outreach events and 70 virtual events. Does the agency track the number of people who have received job offers or who learned about civil service opportunities through these outreach programs?
So I'll turn this over to my colleague, Sylvia Montalban.
Sure, thank you. So yes, thank you for the question on that. So we've built upon our existing and ongoing efforts to educate the public and different communities about the civil service careers through the pathways identified in that local law. And so just to reiterate, we did have over 209 outreach events, and those have reached 25,600 people. And of those events, 86 were actually qualifying pathways under the local law. It is important also to just indicate that with respect to the tracking, the number of job seekers, DCAS doesn't have oversight, of course, into the hiring process, as we mentioned before, of the agencies and the promotions because they're decentralized and they're extension of those job offers. But notwithstanding, we have added a field in our city personnel system so that candidates could be able to indicate where and self-report where they learned about the job opportunity. Okay. That will help us track that more accurately. Mm-hmm. And we've also added a field for agencies to use for them to indicate how their new hires were found and through what job-related events. So, we'll be able to be able to track better that.
Great. And the agency reported participating in 9 outreach events in high schools and 15 at college and universities. What is the feedback that the agency is getting from young people at these events?
So, I don't want to speculate. It's always very positive that I do know because we've been to the events and people are very engaged. I could ask our executive director of citywide recruitment, who is always in the front line meeting a lot of people. Maybe she might have some insight about the young Katie and Otar.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question again for me, please?
Okay, so the question was basically, you all have been at high schools and university campuses. What's the feedback that the agency is getting from young people at these events for the Civil Service Ambassador Program?
So some of the main feedback has been that they were not aware of the different types of opportunities available in city government. Most people are familiar with their uniform titles and uniform agencies, but they weren't aware of the breadth of opportunities and even the process for getting them. Just an example, yesterday we were speaking to AmeriCorps members, and the first thing they're saying is like, wow, this information is so important. I didn't know that there was an option for me to go into city government. And we have been getting a lot of requests to participate in more events to bring this information to more students and even those that are further along in their careers.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it over to the co-chairs for any questions. Chair.
Thank you, Chair De La Rosa. I have a couple of questions, but I'll start here. I heard the disclaimer earlier that you won't be able to provide information about 828 and 829, but I just want to share as executive level representatives for the mayor's office. I'm pretty sure there's some information you could provide today. So I'm going to still ask the questions because I know that you're more than capable of providing some information to us. So regarding Intro 828, sponsored by myself and co-primed by Chair De La Rosa, would require DCAS to collaborate with CUNY to develop written materials to educate students about the city's civil service system and various opportunities to engage with the civil service through CUNY's curriculum or programs. We understand that you may not have had a chance to prepare for this question given the short notice, but do you think you can provide or discuss some of the coursework programs and initiatives offered by CUNY that relate to civil service that you would include in these written materials?
So thank you for that. And, you know, as I mentioned just a short time ago, we have a strong partnership with CUNY already through our fellowship program, so we don't foresee this being a big issue. I also want to hand it over to Katie and Otara to talk more about her outreach through the Office of Recruitment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Across the last 8 years since the Office of Citywide Recruitment has been established, we have formed strong partnerships with the CUNY schools, not only connecting with their career services offices, but looking at professors and chairs in specific departments as it relates to positions within city government. So a part of our assistant agencies with their recruitment, depending on their needs, we would reach out to those specific areas in schools to try to set up either information sessions or career workshops to introduce agencies to and students to the opportunities available. So we also specifically reach out to CUNY schools to participate in their career fairs that they usually have twice per year. And then we engage, again, not only just the career services, but sometimes they have different groups, different programs to make sure that they have the connection and an understanding of the opportunities within city government. So we continue to work with them, and we absolutely will continue to expand our relationship with those groups.
It's great that you guys are doing all these outreach efforts, but you both did not highlight the written materials part. So it'd be good to know, as you're reaching out and collaborating, do you also include information that they could implement within written materials that they give to students?
So the outreach that we do with the CUNY students, during every session, we're doing information sessions. We're providing them with a civil service 101. We are providing them with the notice of exams depending on the session. We're also providing them with the exam schedule, kind of a summary sheet of how to move through the application process to work with city government. We're providing them with FAQs, brochures. So depending on the nature of the event, we do provide them with a lot of different resources, and also link them to places. We have videos on how to actually submit an application on Oasis. So we do a lot in terms of not just speaking to them, even if we're just seeing them at a career fair for 2 minutes, we're still following up to provide them with additional information. We also have a newsletter, jobs newsletter, that is sent out every month, and for folks that are signed up and our career services partners, they get information on the current exams that are open for filing each month, the opportunities that are available, the citywide or city-sponsored recruitment events that are happening, as well as information on any kind of fellowships or internships that are available.
Thank you for that. Intro 829, also sponsored by myself, would require DCAS to conduct an ongoing advertising campaign to promote civil service examinations. You highlighted some of this, so if you could just share a little bit more. Are there any other educational outreach initiatives besides what you do with the fellowship? such as civil service ambassador programs. I didn't hear about the ambassador program, so it'd be great to highlight that. That could model this advertising campaign. And in the past, what methods of educational outreach to the public have proven to be the most effective besides the fellowship program? Thanks.
So as you can see, that is very impactful because our schedule is always too full because so many people want us to come out into the communities.
Right.
And so we, as a part of the updated job boards that we have, we continuously post events that are happening, but we also promote on our social media pages. We also, again, share flyers with the communities whenever we're hosting different events. But outside of just even DCAS, on a citywide scale, there are agencies that have their own recruitment and marketing campaigns where you will see postings on the subways, or sometimes I'm riding a subway and I take a picture. This is awesome what the agencies are doing to promote their opportunities. And furthermore, for one of our local laws, you will see some information around what other agencies are specifically doing and expenditures around those plans. So that's to come.
Do you fund those campaigns?
I'm sorry?
Do you fund those campaigns?
No, DCAS does not.
Maybe you should fund them. Give some extra money. All right, the last question. The 55A program is a program designed to promote equity and inclusion among civil service job candidates with a certified mental and physical disability, and evaluates people based on their qualifications and their interviews rather than through a competitive examination. So I wanted to know which NYC agencies offer 55A program participant placements.
Sure, I can answer that, and we also have our leader here who's in charge of the program, so this is really great. So we have approximately 34 agencies that actually are utilizing the program now, but it's, and they're primarily one of the larger top 5 are the larger agencies, which are Department of Social Services, Department of Education, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Department of Finance, and the NYPD. It is important to note that the program is available for use by the city agencies that fall under DCAS jurisdiction, and we're very assertively promoting the program to all agencies to utilize it as a pipeline into hiring and diversifying their workforce for competitive status positions. So we find that the program has been successful. There has been interest generated. Of course, people come in and out of the program because some people promote out of it, and so they move on, but new people come in. But right now we have 34 agencies there.
Do you know in totality how many participants you have citywide?
Yeah, yes, currently as of March 31st of this year, we have 333 program participants. Katie, and I don't know if you want to say anything else.
I'll just add to what Sylvia, our deputy commissioner, said, is that we do have folks that are coming in and out of the program, but one of the great things that we're seeing is the influx of new people that are getting into city government through the 55A program, and that is due to the extensive outreach that we do specifically to communities for people that are with disabilities. We also work a lot with educating the agencies, training them on how to do recruit within the diversity and disability community. Some of the things that, understanding how to communicate and understanding what the 55A program is and what it's not. And so we try to take on different approaches. One, educating the public, but also making sure that our city agencies are educated on the program. So when folks are applying and, indicating that they're interested in the 55A program, the agencies are aware of what it is and how to use it to diversify their workforce.
All right, thank you. I'm going to hand it back over to Chair De La Rosa.
Chair Williams?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. So there are a few more questions. I'll ask, although obviously the administration is not obligated to comment on resolutions, Resol 346A does call on DCAS to exercise its discretion to grant additional points on promotional exams to applicants who have completed the agency's executive development and management and supervision trainings, as well as those who have earned a degree or certificate from the City University of New York or a similarly accredited institution. Does the agency have a position or a comment on this resolution at this time?
We're concerned about the equitable distribution of those points on civil service exams, but once again, Chair De La Rosa, I'm open to having a conversation so that we can figure out, what's possible.
Great.
based on civil service law.
Great, thank you so much for your consideration. In regards to intro 743, again about career counseling services, do you foresee any barriers or challenges to offering such counseling services? You already spoke about your jurisdiction and, you know, how it would be hard to implement that across agencies, but wanted to hear your take on sort of any other barriers.
Yes, once again, we're supportive of that type of service for city employees, but as the bill is written, it's not feasible for DCAS to administer career counseling for 300,000 plus city employees. However, as stated earlier, career counseling is happening across the city. Even at DCAS, the agency, we have a career counselor, and the services that are provided by our HR department, they're very popular. The career counselor put out her schedule, and within a day or two, she's booked for the entire year. So we know that there is value in this type of service. We just want to make sure that we're providing it at a high level, because it is very important for employees to understand, how to elevate in their current capacities.
Great. Okay, so intro 809, which requires DCAS to post an annual report on its website that describes the factors that are considered by the department when they decide to expand or not expand the eligibility for promotional exams. For most vacant competitive class positions at the managerial or supervisory level, promotional exams are available to employees who currently hold a position in the direct line of promotion for that vacant title. This bill would require DCAS to explain the decision-making process behind expanding eligibility to employees who are in comparable positions to that vacant title or to employees who are currently serving in a related line of promotion. For which agencies does DCAS have a career ladder trajectories mapped out? For example, the NYPD has career ladders mapped out where an employee's upward trajectory within the agency will follow a very specific structure, from officer to sergeant to lieutenant to captain and so on. Has DCAS thought about upward trajectories and how to map that out for other agencies?
Each title in the city's portfolio, their promotional track is available in an internal system that we call Title Specifications Online. So we have that information readily available. We're just a bit unclear about the goal of that particular bill, but once again, we would love to meet and just talk through the purpose and goal of that particular bill.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have that conversation offline. I think the intent and the spirit is really to provide information so that folks know this is the clear path within this title, and this is something that I can aspire to, right? But we can certainly have those conversations. Let's see, asked about that. Okay. Any other questions, Chair Williams? No? All right. I think we're good. Thank you all so much for coming out today.
Thank you so much.
We're looking forward to the conversation.
Yes,
Continued conversation. Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you. We're going to ask Jeannie Victor and Russell Ferry, from the Equal Employment Practices Commission to come up to the witness table and begin your testimony once the committee counsel swears you in. So Jeannie Victor and Russell Ferry.
Good afternoon. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
Do you all have testimony or just Q&A today? Yeah, so please begin. Thank you.
So good afternoon, Chair De La Rosa, Chair Hudson, Chair Lewis, Chair Williams, and members of the committees on Civil Service and Labor, Women and Gender Equity, and Civil and Human Rights. My name is Jean Victor, and I'm the Executive Director of the Equal Employment Practices Commission, otherwise known as the EEPC, a small, independent, non-mayoral oversight entity charged with auditing the EEO programs of city entities. In addition, we perform research into the underutilization of women and people of color in accordance with Local Law 13 of 2019. To my right, I'm here with our Director of Research, Russell Ferry. In the 3 years that I've held the Executive Director position, I have seen a great deal of movement by City Council and DCAS to address inequities in the workplace, most recently requiring exit interviews, offering employee development such as management skill training, hiring managers on unconscious bias, and human resources efforts to employ people with disabilities, just to name a few. Yet despite all the effort, inequities unfortunately continue to exist. I want to start by saying that disparities between white men, women, and people of color are pervasive nationwide. In February 2024, the McKinsey Institute for Black Economic Mobility published a report entitled "The State of Black Residents: The Relevance of Place to Racial Equity and Outcomes," and noted that there are substantial gaps between Black and white residents in virtually every county in the United States. In fact, their analysis determined that there is nowhere in the United States where outcomes for Black residents equal those of their white neighbors. And as they look across the past decade to gauge the rate of progress, they note that while multiple metrics have been improving for Black residents, those gains have not closed racial gaps in any meaningful way, as white outcomes improved to the same degree or even more so. They concluded that at the current pace, it could take more than 300 years for Black residents across the nation to reach parity with their white neighbors. Progress has not yielded parity. In our 2022 report, as part of the EEPC's research activities into the underutilization of women and people of color in the city's workforce, we created a chart depicting job group composition and median salary by race, ethnicity, and gender, as well as conducted an analysis of 6 job titles in the New York City workforce, namely police officer, correction officer, school safety agent, sanitation worker, case worker, social worker, and firefighter. Here's what we found. White workers tended to be more populous in titles in the higher paid job groups, such as sanitation worker, firefighter, and police officer. And women and people of color tended to be more populous in titles in the lower paid job groups, such as school safety agent, social worker, caseworker. Despite the requirement that social workers have a master's degree and caseworkers have a bachelor's degree. All the other titles analyzed in this report have either a 60 college credit requirement or a high school diploma requirement. In the fourth quarter of FY21, underutilization was identified in 22 of the city's 29 job groups. Women were underutilized in 20 of the job groups. Black employees were underutilized in 13 job groups, and Hispanics and Asians were each underutilized in 10 job groups. But the overrepresentation of women and people of color in the correction officer, school safety agent, social worker, caseworker titles suggested the presence of occupational segregation, which is defined as the concentration of individuals from certain groups, typically racial, ethnic, and/or gender groups, into certain occupations and job groups. Historically, this has manifested with white men disproportionately employed in higher paying jobs and women and people of color employed in lower paying jobs. For this reason, we recommended at that time that the city aggressively offer training for workers in those job groups that are at the lower end of the salary scale, such as caseworker, food preparation, guards, clerical, etc., to encourage those workers who are able and interested in gaining skills to qualify for higher salary jobs the opportunity to do so. In this way, workers in these job groups may find opportunities for future growth, which may provide career pathways for women and Black, Hispanic, Asian employees to advance their careers into jobs with higher wages. Targeted training would also provide additional opportunities for new workers interested in starting a career with the City of New York. By investing in its employees, the city can create jobs for new employees who may be at the beginning of their careers, while encouraging current employees to qualify for higher paying roles within the city's workforce. Since our 2022 report, since then, McKinsey & Company, a management consulting firm, published an article in December 2023 on generative AI's impact on Black economic mobility. In it, McKinsey states that new wealth created by digital and AI capabilities flows through an economy where the median Black household has only about 15% of the wealth held by the median white household. The data are striking. According to McKinsey, the median Black family has amassed about $44,900 in wealth, while the median white household holds $285,000 in total assets. Without correcting long-standing patterns, generative AI has the potential to increase this racial wealth gap. Black Americans capture only about 38 cents of every dollar of new household wealth due to AI, despite representing 13% of the population. If this trend continues and projections of the growth of Black households are accurate, by 2045, racially disparate distribution of new wealth created by generative AI could increase the wealth gap between Black and white households by $43 billion annually. The article states that Black workers are increasingly overrepresented in 4 of the top 5 occupations at risk of automation: office support, production work, food services, and mechanical installation and repair. And if reskilling efforts are not undertaken now, this trend only stands to worsen. According to their analysis of the data, 24% of all Black workers are in occupations with greater than 75% automation potential, compared with just 20% of white workers, and they conclude that Gen AI will likely alter the professional pathways that Black workers rely on to move from low-wage to higher-paying roles. The authors go on to say, however, that leaders have an opportunity to build equity and fairness into their developing generative AI strategies and associated applications, and can accelerate the closing of the racial gap by preparing workers to meet the needs of a post-Gen AI landscape. McKinsey's recommendation is to prepare workers by training them in skills that cannot be easily displaced by technology in the near future, by emphasizing foundational and nuanced skill building instead of role-specific training. So in conclusion, the growth of AI only adds to the urgency of addressing pay disparities in the city's workforce, because if the city fails to get ahead of it, it can set back all of the gains and progress that have been achieved to date and exacerbate the existing racial gap. What is required is a program of ensuring equal pay for equal work, identifying and removing barriers embedded in hiring and promotional practices, analyzing the civil service system to ensure hiring and promotional practices are fair and equitable, employee development and career counseling, understanding why employees choose to leave, continuously reviewing relevant employment metrics to ensure all of the city's efforts are making a difference, and tweaking those efforts when necessary. Thank you for inviting me and Russell to speak with you today, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Hello, thanks for coming. I always appreciate the work that you all do. So we know that your mandate is to monitor and conduct data analysis on equity in city agencies, employment policies, programs, and practices through which you've identified that the city underutilizes women and people of color, particularly in higher paid positions. Does your data suggest any causal connections between underutilization and pay inequity, or other patterns in the city's hiring and retention of employees? For example, are there any patterns of certain types of inequities or violations being more common in particular occupations or salary bands?
Russell, do you want to take that?
So thank you for the question. Unfortunately, the data that we have does not allow us to make any strong causal claims that you would suggest in the question. Certainly, we're aware of other studies that have been done of similar populations that are able to sort of make it those kinds of inferences, but with the data that we have available to us, I couldn't in good conscience claim that there's that we can make any strong causal claims like the kind that you ask about.
So is it the data, or is it just the inability to like run a particular analysis on the data? So you don't have the data, or is it just you don't have like maybe the right tools to analyze some of the data that could answer that?
It's more that we don't have the data.
Okay. In its 2023 annual report, EEPC recommended that the city research the drivers of occupational segregation. This was in connection to EEPC's findings that women and people of color continue to be underutilized in the city workforce due to both underhiring and higher attrition rates. Can you share more about what EEPC's analysis suggests about the relationship between occupational segregation and other forms of inequity that exists within the municipal workforce?
So there's a couple of issues there, and as you all have pointed out in some of the graphs that you were showing earlier, right, there certainly is occupational segregation in the city that is also pervasive throughout the rest of the country. In terms of things like the attrition rates and the hiring rates, the point that we were making in the reports is that in addition to the fact that you have these positions that already are disparate in terms of, disproportionately either too many women and people of color compared to what you would expect or too few, is that the hiring patterns and the attrition patterns tend to only make it worse. So it's one thing to say it's the city, it's the civil service system, people tend to stay, and so therefore it takes time for things to change. But even when people are coming on board or leaving, they're leaving at disproportionate rates that tend to only exacerbate the problems. And certainly, I can't say confidently with the data that we have that is, particularly true in terms of higher or lower paying positions, but I would suspect that that is the case.
Are you able to track other forms of compensation, such as the availability of key benefits, like paid sick and parental leave in your work?
No, we are not, other than what's publicly available in union contracts and negotiations, but we don't have any other data beyond that.
Okay, so it's not something that you can include in like future reports?
Not with what we have right now, no.
Okay, how many suspected or alleged human rights law violations do you typically uncover in your reporting? I don't know if this is something that you do or something that's more so related to the work of CCHR. Like, I don't know if you're referring things to CCHR. I know CCHR has its own challenges because they don't really provide oversight to city agencies.
Right. So when it comes to human rights law violations, if we encounter something during the course of an audit, we will refer it to CCHR. I can think of one or two occasions when we've done that. There was one occasion, though, that we became aware of a violation and we went to the law department with that. And it was a violation that the law department was working on with the agency.
So you sent it to CCHR, but ultimately, did CCHR send it to the law department, or how did the law department get involved?
Now, for one of the violations that I learned of, I sent it to the law department. I contacted the law department to find out if anything was being done to address the violation, and I was told that yes, they were working on it because that particular agency was under the auspices of a monitor, so they were working in concert together.
But are you required to refer things to CCHR by way of the law? Okay.
Yes.
So it just depends on what the things are, whether or not you refer it to CCHR or the law department?
No, normally we would just refer everything to CCHR.
Okay. Okay, I could ask more questions, but I don't know if my colleagues or chairs have any other questions. Okay, I'll keep going. In addition to conducting audits, EEPC also makes recommendations for agencies to improve their hiring and retention practices. it was interesting to hear from DCAS because, of course we want to see recruitment practices that really build a diverse workforce, but I think some of the issues that we're seeing require a retrospective analysis of retention. So just wondering what kind of compliance have you seen from agencies in following your recommendations? When an agency does follow EEPC recommendations, has EEPC seen or documented any impacts on the practices themselves in terms of improvement? And are there any best practices that EEPC would recommend to be implemented more widely by city agencies?
Okay. So when it comes to following recommendations, EEPC, the way that we conduct our audit is we have a series of audit standards that we look at what the agency is doing against the audit standards. In this case, we're doing an audit on underutilization of women and people of color. And we have about 20 standards that we look at. And in reference to retention and to hiring, we look to see that they have the structure in place. We don't necessarily, we're not there long enough to know if it's working. What we want to look at is whether or not they have the program in place. And we ask them to provide evidence that they have the program in place. We want to see policies, or we want to see emails. Like, for example, if one of our standards is that you have to have posted your EEO statement. If we're auditing the agency and we ask them, give us evidence that you've posted your EEO statement. We'd either like to see a photograph of it someplace where it's posted for everyone to see, and an email advising all employees that this is where the policy has been posted, or we'd like to see an email to all employees that says, here's a copy of the policy for your use. So we look and see if they have the framework in place to make sure that they are that their program is compliant. So in terms of compliance, we don't leave the audit, we don't close the audit until 100% of the standards are met. So once the standards are met, the agency receives a determination of compliance, and we move on. We re-audit the agency in 4 years, but there could be completely different standards because we might be doing a sexual harassment audit at that point. So we might be looking at the program from a different perspective. So, one thing that I'll say is that when agencies are subject to the EEPC audit and we're looking at the standards, we don't necessarily know that those standards remain in place, because as we move on and come back, we may not be looking at those same exact standards again 4 years from now. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm wondering how you do cross-reference back to make sure that the standards have been kept in place over a period of time once they make whatever remediation.
So that is something that we would very much like to do, but we're not able at this point to do any spot checks or to go back and to see if the standards are still if they're still in compliance with their program, because we're a small agency and we just don't have the ability to do that at this point.
Okay, do you have any other suggestions around how to strengthen the work that your agency is doing in relations to pay equity? And just random question, do you work with DCAS at all? Like, is there any cross-sharing? Like, how do you work with DCAS?
Yeah. So historically, the EEPC has been independent, which meant that it really functioned on its own with very little input from other agencies. But since I've been in place, we have been working with DCAS. Most recently, we're reviewing our audit standards with them to make sure that what DCAS is telling the agencies at what I'll call the front end of the process, and we're looking at the back end of the process because we're going back and making sure that things are in place. We want to make sure that what DCAS is telling the agencies and what we are telling the agencies are in alignment. So yes, we are working together to make sure that they are fully aware of what the audit process looks like, what we are asking agencies to produce in terms of this particular audit, and that, that we're all in agreement with what the standards should be. And I wanted to go back to your first part of your question, because if you could just repeat that one more time so I can.
Yeah, you know, I always love to get you guys on the record about like certain things that we could do to strengthen the work that you do. To hold agencies accountable, to remediate issues, and or to do more to address a lot of the employment practices that are both, you know, nationally trending, but also like very specific to New York City.
I think there's plenty of room for improvement. I think there are a lot of things that we can do to make things a lot better. For instance, we want to make sure, you know, it's my goal that agencies have zero corrective actions. I want, when I go in to audit an agency, I am expecting there to be zero corrective actions, because that means their program is in compliance and that they don't have to have corrective actions. One thing I noted is that in last year's audit, we audited 43 agencies. Our top 3 audit standards where we had corrective actions where one was designate a career counselor, and we talked about, I heard that, you know, as part of the discussion in the last panel. We had 13 corrective actions for designating a career counselor. The annual workforce data review, which was another area where agencies just were not really sitting down with their agency head and their EEO officer and their HR officer to talk about the areas of underutilization and to determine what kind of plan they were going to adopt to address it. We saw that lacking. And then our biggest number of corrective actions involved training for personnel involved in recruiting and hiring. We want to make sure that the people that are making the decisions at the table, that are interviewing the candidates, that they are trained to, and recognize unconscious bias, that they recognize what the process should be. And we found that, you know, training was part of a corrective action. So these are things that I think that agencies can do better. I think that if I had...
Can you share the agencies, the top 3 agencies that were subject to these corrective actions?
I don't have that with me, but I can get that for you.
Okay, and then you mentioned like a really interesting topic around AI, and you know, it's definitely a very trending thing right now. And so, again, just wondering, what specific recommendations do you have, if any, about how we can work to address that on the city level?
So McKinsey in their report was suggesting or recommending that that workers be trained. And you know, one of the things that, you know, we might want to focus on is not necessarily training every single person in the workforce, not necessarily looking at a career counselor for every single person in the workforce, because not everybody is in that position. But I think really identifying the roles like clerical, like I said caseworker during my testimony, you know, there's certain roles within city government that will be impacted by AI, and really focusing on those particular titles and offering career counseling to those folks, because those people are going to be most impacted by the changes that are coming.
Thank you. I don't think I have any other questions. I'd be interested in knowing how much you think it'll cost to build out your agency to be able to do spot checks and really make sure that a lot of the remediation and corrective actions are being addressed, because what is the point of auditing and providing these recommendations to not know if they're actually being put in place and to not be able to quantify what the impact is, if any, around whatever corrective measure is supposed to be taken up by the agency. So just for future, I would love to know, like, if you had a wish list of, you know, the things that you feel like your agency really needs to do your work most robustly, what would that be and how much would that cost? So not for now, but if you can send it sooner than later. Interesting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. Well, we thank you for being here today, and thank you for answering the questions to the best of your ability. Thank you. I now open the floor up to public testimony. Before we begin, I remind members of the public that this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recordings or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant-at-Arms for inclusion in the hearing's record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant-at-Arms and wait for your name to be called. Once you've been recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic of pay disparities in the municipal workforce. If you have written statements or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant-at-Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. I now will call our first panel, which include representatives of CWA 1180 and the Murphy Institute at CUNY, Ms. Gloria Middleton, Mr. Arthur Chiliotis, and Gregory Mancios. Please come up to the witness stand, and thank you for your patience in waiting today. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Middleton.
Good afternoon, committee chairs De La Rosa, Williams, and Lewis, committee members and city council members. My name is Gloria Middleton. I am president of Communication Workers of America, Local 1180. My union represents almost 9,000 active city, administrative, and private sector workers and close to 6,000 retirees. One of our main objectives as a union representing predominantly women and women of color has always been to fight for equal salaries for all. But you all know that. Local 1180 has been one of the leading outspoken voices in the past decade for women and women of color. Pay inequity is not a new problem in the city of New York. You know that too. In 2016, we successfully sued the city of New York in an EEO lawsuit that resulted in a $15 million win for our members because the facts were on our side. That lawsuit was pivotal in our decision to recommend legislation forcing the city to look at statistics that would illuminate pay parity for all municipal workers throughout every agency. We sit here today as a result of that legislation. Local Law 18, with firsthand information that proves what we already knew to be true. The results of the recent pay equity report released by the council demonstrates that large gender and racial pay gaps still exist in the New York City municipal workforce. It is hard to fathom that years after I first started testifying at council hearings about this ongoing issue, here we are again. The wage gap between what white men and women of color earn continues to rob a clear sector of workers of fair wages and the economic stability to support themselves and their families. Local Law 18, which requires an annual study of the city's workforce salaries, clearly needs strengthening. We must pass laws to advance promotional and career development opportunities that include using the civil service system and encouraging women and minorities to obtain college degrees while employed as a means to increase salaries. My members ask me over and over again, how do I get to the maximum salary of my title? I received my BA, my MA, and my agency does not recognize my competency or my sacrifice. It's unconscionable that as of 2021, the latest year for which data is available, city government workers of color earn just 84 cents for every dollar paid in salary to white workers, with 2/3 of that wage gap being due to disparate salaries for female employees of color. With the latest study showing that persistent wage gaps are largely due to occupational segregation, whereby women and people of color are concentrated in job titles that historically pay less, Local 11A stands behind the council's 4 bills seeking to promote diversity in the upper ranks of government. Everyone, regardless of race or gender, has a right to be compensated fairly and adequately for their hard work in keeping this city running. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Arthur Chiliotis. I am the President Emeritus of Local 1180 and currently the business manager. I started working for the city in 1972, probably before any of you were born, sitting on the panel here. And what I can tell you from the start is it was clear to me that, in fact, women and minorities were not being treated the same. When I was elected president in 1975, we focused on that issue because we saw what the Koch administration had done to minimize the salaries of women and minorities and to make it difficult for them to get promoted. And your chart that you had up before regarding the salary ranges and where women and minorities fall, you should remember that within each job title, there are assignment levels. And management has the discretion to appoint people to each of those assignment levels. As some of the staff here can testify, we are constantly filing out-of-title grievances, out-of-level grievances, because people are doing the work at higher levels but not being compensated for it. And to remedy this, one of the things that we had done is we created steps to settle our EEO case, to make sure that the minimum salaries went up every year to give the people who were doing the job, getting the experience, but not being given the opportunities of being discriminated against, would at least get some increase as they moved up the ranks. Again, hearing some of the testimony earlier, DCAS, through all the fights that we have had, has not been a facilitator, even though they're of equal employment opportunities. They've been an impediment. They have at every turn not provided the information that was needed for our EEO case. They claimed they didn't have it. That's what created this report that you have today. And so the question is, what do we do going forward? We have invested hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in giving our members tuition credits so that they can get college degrees, bachelor's and master's degrees, and as Gloria pointed out. And then what? Nothing moves along. And so I think it's up to you to take a long look at things like promotional opportunities for people that earn degrees, and the recent civil service exam for promotion to police officer included a very interesting thing. It included traffic enforcement agents, associate traffic enforcement agents, school security officers. That's a large group of minorities and women who now will have access at a promotional level to be hired as police officers, making a demographic difference in the constitution of police officers in New York City. And that's one example of what can be done. The other, I think that the dean from the School of Labor Studies will talk about is the parent-to-teacher program. And I've gone beyond my time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Chris.
Yep. Good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Greg Mancios. I'm the founding dean of the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies, a school that's dedicated to public service and social justice. Our work spans nearly 40 decades. Over the course of that time, 4 decades, 4 decades, I'm not that old. Over the course of that time, we have provided higher educational opportunities to thousands of public sector workers, predominantly women and people of color. Our students from CWA 1180 and AFSCME DC 37 and others receive very generous tuition benefit from their unions. These students work hard, they're juggling jobs and family obligations and attend classes in the evening and devote their times to studies outside of the classroom. And they do extremely well. Yet the number one complaint that I have heard for 40 years is that despite the educational achievements that our students receive from these unions, too many of these students feel trapped by a system that keeps them on low-paying career paths. I should point out that this is not the case for other students. And just one example that Arthur mentioned, the DOE and the UFT work with us to establish a program for paraprofessionals to pursue a career in education. And they provide everything from tuition to, coursework. We do career counseling. We do special tutoring and see those paraprofessionals through their careers as public school teachers. I can get into more details about that later if you'd like. But job segregation and pay disparity, especially in the context of educational achievement, is an anathema to the American dream and the revered ideal that education creates upward mobility. We've been singing this song of inequality for a long time, but there's a new urgency in this program because of the 2024 pay disparity report. It shows us that there's a historical pattern and consequence of job segregation and wage disparity. And secondly, there's a clear path forward. The consequences of the past practices are shameful, but the path towards the future is clear. We commend 1180 and the Council for taking up the issue and for creating remedies that they are proposing. The report calls on DCAS to reconsider practices that, quote, rank eligible candidates for promotion so as to better recognize highly skilled and motivated employees, end of quote, to rightly reward the employees who are currently trapped in lower paying and segregated jobs. We urge the city to, one, provide these students with additional points on the civil service exam, as is done with veterans of the armed services. Two, provide pay increases for those who complete a college course of study, as is done by the DOE for teachers who complete a master's plus 30 credits. And three, provide courses of study that meet city agency needs and then allow graduates to take selective certification exams. And we're very happy to sit down with DCAS to identify subject matter and skill sets that will prepare city workers to entry into these segregated, especially into segregated occupational titles. These measures will break what the report calls the cycle of occupational segregation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you all so much. I have to say that we're here in large part because of the work that you all have set forth. I said to Gloria earlier that Local Law 18 is your baby. Yes, it is. It's our job to raise it so that we can fix the problem. And of course, CUNY, we were talking about CUNY. CUNY is the natural partner for our workforce. And so sometimes it's a little maddening to sit here and, we have no answers to the question about if CUNY should be the pathway. We know that is the pathway. Education is the passport to the future. We know that, right? So I do have a question. In terms of what we've presented today as a council, right? Under the leadership of our speaker, we are so laser focused on closing this gap, and some of the ideas that have come out include offering career counseling, right, which is done but is not done in a way that is structural across agencies, making sure that workplace culture surveys are in place, making sure that promotional exams, well, making sure that we understand and that they cast reports on the decision-making process for promotional exams, making sure, as Chair Lewis mentioned, CUNY is a big part of that pathway to employment, making sure that the public is engaged in the outreach, and then finally looking at ways in which promotional points can be assessed, right, in the upward mobility of employees. Which one of these bills, or can you give us your professional sort of criteria in terms of which one of these bills would be most impactful in your estimation in us closing the gap? And what are some of your thoughts about us as a city being able to administer these things in a way that is impactful for workers?
Well, so using the CUNY program as a pathway, we have suggestions, and Greg can speak more to it, about getting to high school students and letting them know about being able to come into city service. And there is a program that we have talked about with the administration, which would educate young people as to how important it is to have a civil service job and how secure it is. As far as DCAS, there's a lot of things that DCAS said that, while I know they have good intentions, their hands are sort of tied by the agencies. They don't have the power that they need to hold these agencies accountable. It's, in my opinion and in my experience, it seems like the agencies do their own thing, and it takes a lot for DCAS to hold them accountable. We're going through something right now with a civil service list for a particular agency where they did not abide by the civil service rules. They picked and chose who they want to become administrative managers because there was that ban when everybody scores 100. And we're asking DCAS to now go back, because they're supposed to certify who they called. And it's supposed to be done within 30 days. It was not done within 30 days. So you're telling me that DCAS does not have the power to oversee what these agencies are doing. If a member hadn't spoke up and we hadn't caught it, they would have gotten away with it. So there has to be more accountability for the agencies to report to DCAS. I think they need a little more power in order for these gaps to be taken care of. You want to speak on?
Yeah, I think the issue of targeting segregated classifications and putting in a course of study that allows them to take promotional exams to better paying jobs is a vehicle that can undo a lot of what is going on. And we have offered with DCAS in the past, tell us what the agencies want. Tell us what skill sets you need. We will work with the university to get those skill sets, but then give these people a leg up, like they did with the promotional exam for police officer. That's a classic example. There's also the issue you spoke about earlier about language skills. There is a system already in place of selective certifications that puts someone who has scored, let's say, 30 on a civil service list. But if you are a Spanish speaker, you might be put number 1 on a Spanish speaker selective certification. Those are all opportunities to deal with targeted groups. The other thing that I spoke about earlier was step plans. Our union, with our settlement, put in step plans for administrative managers. Much of what DCAS reported recently about the increase in pay for minorities and women is attributed to that, to our case, not to what they did, and needs to be further analyzed. Because I believe that only by aggressively pursuing them and forcing them to do things, things will get done. There's also another part to this. You've got to fund them. You've got to give them the resources to do the job. Just because they might be given the authority to enforce the laws, if they don't have the funding to hold exams frequently, then you're not going to achieve what you need to achieve. And the classic example of this, white male-dominated positions, usually in the uniformed forces, have regular civil service exams. Meanwhile, job titles that are held predominantly by minorities and women, maybe once a decade. Well, that means your potential to move up the ranks is limited to once every 10 years rather than once every 3 or 4 years. So holding promotional exams frequently, giving a bridge for lower paying jobs to those promotional exams is a way to, and the other aspect of it is citywide lists. If you're on a promotional list, you're usually limited to your particular agency, which might be a small agency that doesn't have that many opportunities to move up. But there might be other agencies that exhaust their promotional list immediately and then have the right to go to an open competitive list. Why not having a promotional citywide list so that those people who are blocked in their particular agency have the opportunity to move to another agency and make the higher pay? Those are all mechanisms clearly available under the current rules of the city charter and the personal rules of the city of New York. And I've appended all those to my testimony that was given out and that I posted on your website.
Okay, I'd like Greg to talk about
Yeah.
We've spoken today about the fellowship program that CUNY has that brings college graduates to civil service. Gloria was referencing a proposal that we actually have before the City Council now called the Social Justice Training Corps. It's modeled after ROTC. It starts with high school and prepares students from disadvantaged communities to enter into career paths that would take them through college, from high school where they start to take college courses. Then they go into our program, take their college courses with us, earn a certificate in community leadership, and pursue that through their bachelor's degree. We provide them with career counseling that would get them into public service or social justice advocacy work. It's a great program. We've had other good ideas here. I think the career counseling is a great idea. I think the work culture survey is a great idea. The two programs, though, that involve CUNY, as wonderful as they are, they don't address the fundamental problem that we're talking about here, which is the current workforce. You know, what are we going to do for the current workforce to remedy an injustice that they're carrying still today? I mean, what do we say to the students who are continuing to tell us, the workers and our students who continue to tell us, I'm trapped. I can't get above where I am. And so I think the recommendation for providing points on civil service exam is a great way to address that issue. I think Arthur's point about selective service selected certification exams is another great way to address that issue. The point that I made, pay increases that are tied to educational achievement, is another way to address that. We're talking about people who are working really hard, are highly motivated, as the report says. You want to reward those people who work hard and are highly motivated. When you go to school at the end of the day, after juggling everything else all day long, and you go to school, that's a sacrifice. That's showing motivation. There ought to be a connection, as there are in so many other professions and jobs, between your educational achievement and your pay. So those are just some of the ideas I think that are worth addressing.
So you said which one of your resolutions that we think is more important? We like all of them.
We like your answer. Chairs, any other questions for the panel? Okay. We thank you so much for being here and the members for waiting and sticking around. This is truly important, and your feedback, I took so many notes just from your feedback. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to call the next panel. The second panel, can we please have the following people come up to the witness table? Michael Greco, Christopher Leon Johnson, Dalvane, Powell, and Kyle Simmons. We'll start with Michael when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Michael Greco. I am the Vice President of Local 2507, representing EMTs, paramedics, and fire inspectors serving in the FDNY. I want to thank the speaker and the committee here today for their tireless work to address the issue of pay disparity in the city's workforce. Pay inequity has a devastating impact on our members and all EMS members in the department, which maintains a severely segregated workforce, the FDNY. If we want to correct pay inequity in our workforce, it is not enough to just work to open doors to the jobs that have been traditionally withheld from women and non-white municipal employees, like that of firefighters. Although that work is important, we also have to change the value we place on the work done in those titles that have larger amounts of women and non-white employees like EMS. And I know everyone says, well, but what about the budget? But this argument that other things are more important to spend money on just reflects our lack of prioritizing women and people of color. Paying employees equitably should not be a budgetary issue. Budgetary limitations cannot be an excuse to subject the city's employees to exploitative work conditions. Our members live hand to mouth, most live below the poverty line, many are on government subsidies. Our members are in a constant state of stress as they slip into more and more debt just to stay alive, so that they can serve in extremely high-stress, demanding jobs. Meanwhile, they watch as their colleagues are given unlimited paid sick leave, salaries almost twice what they are paid, and benefits and working conditions substantially different. All of this just perpetuates a culture and a mentality that allows for segregation and keeps women and people of color in poverty. This is not the effect employment opportunities with the City of New York should have. Year after year, the FDNY appears before this body trying to convince it hiring 70 women as firefighters is a big step forward in correcting the deeply rooted culture of discrimination in the FDNY. But we know 2 decades after the Vulcan class action, we have made little change. The EMS unions also filed a complaint in 2019, and the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which found that the FDNY discriminates in its pay practices towards EMS first responders. A half a decade later, the city has done nothing to remedy this. As long as you allow one group to be undervalued, you will have a system where there is the haves and have-nots, and you will continue to see a segregated workforce like mirrors that. The only way to close the gap is to not just open doors to diversify white and male jobs, but to also give proper value to the jobs in which women and people of color perform. I thank you for your time and commitment to this important work. And I just wanted to add towards the end, collective bargaining, while it's important, they've nicknamed that now pattern bargaining. So that is a problem when it comes to equity and diversity, because if you have a very high-paid workforce like PD, like FD, and they're getting $100,000, and the pattern is 10%, you end up giving the higher-paying workforce a $10,000 raise, while the underprivileged or the underserved that's making $50,000 gets a $5,000 raise. So you just get exponentially further and further apart. So that is a big problem. Each service should be able to bargain for what they're worth, and any change that should be made, we shouldn't be told, well, we'd like to help you, but then 250,000 other people are gonna, be arbitration eligible. So thank you very much for your time, and I thank you for everything you've put into this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am the President of the United Probation Officers Association. I thank the Committee on Parity, Disparity in the Municipal Workforce for affording me on behalf of the members of the United Probation Officers Association. Currently, there are approximately 650 probation officers and supervisors, and a large number of our members are women and people of color. Significantly lower than, lower than nearly two decades ago. Prior to Mayor Bloomberg's administration, there was approximately 1,550 probation officers, but those numbers have steadily dropped to more than half in the recent years, even as our workload has increased due to a combination of factors such as bail reform and the implementation of the raise to age litigation that increased the number of people we serve. To continue performing our duties to the best of our abilities, we need your help. The Department of Probation serves issues with retention, has severe issues with retention and recruitment. According to the Department of Citywide Administration, we fall under the category of hard to hire. Why? Because our members are leaving for other high-paying positions within the criminal justice system. While there are civil service examinations for probation officers in July 2022 and one for supervising probation officer in May 2021, there has not been an exam for the administration probation officers since 2017, though we just recently scheduled one for July 16th of this year. In addition to the increased caseloads, morale has plummeted and our members are beyond frustrated because our salaries are the lowest in the metropolitan area, including on Long Island, Westchester County, Suffolk County. Our compensation lags behind other law enforcement agencies, although we perform the same work as our colleagues in the nearby jurisdiction, adhere to the same job requirements, work with the same population, and face the same similar dangers. And our salaries are $30,000 less than those working in the Department of Corrections and even those considered community corrections supervisions. Our members have been without a contract since November 2020. This is simply not acceptable. While we are in contract with negotiations that has moved like a snail. While there is a salary range for our title under the current and past contracts, many of our members are suppressed to the lower end of the range with little opportunity to earn more, nor do our members ever reach the top salary for our title like other peace officers. For example, the rate for a probation officer is hiring rate is $45,934. The incumbent rate is $51,903. The max is $76,483. And now it takes a probation officer 11 years to get $57,880 in comparison to a correctional officer who earns $96,803 after 5 years, and a finding that City Council pointed out in 2019. We are aware that not only are those in city law enforcement workforces reach their maximum salaries, but there are several civilians who also reach their top salaries as well. For example, deputy sheriffs who are also peace officers but considered civilians earn $92,000 after 5.5 years. Additionally, dozens of UPOA members are earning below contractual wage rates, which we have been demanding that the city rectify. Simply put, please bear with me, I'm almost finished. We are continually being asked to do more with less. To do more, we must find ways to be more efficient and productive and receive additional training and better equipment. Our members have the skills and knowledge. They have bachelor's and master's degrees in education and experience in social work to serve our clients so they can live productive, law-abiding lives. Our members are peace officers. We manage caseloads and who are part of task force with other law enforcement agencies such as U.S. Marshals, Drug Enforcement, NYPD, and among others. We carry firearms, make arrests, execute warrants, and we also prepare reports for courts for sentencing reasons. We must be designated as uniformed law enforcement members instead of civilians because we perform the same work as NYPD and we face the similar dangers. Recently, let me give you an example. In 2022, one of my members was severely injured when she was trying to make an arrest, and she's been out for 18 months on an assault grant. And this is one of the reasons why we need to be classified as law enforcement. Additionally, we are charged by the city to oversee over 15,000 men, women, and youth who have been convicted of crimes and sentenced to probation instead of jail, bail, and prison. We are responsible for ensuring they do not violate the terms of their probation, and we work to turn their lives around. This alone serves the city and the state. This alone saves the city and the state considerable costs, so that our charges do not return to recidivate. I'm concluding. I would like to request that after this hearing, that the UPOA can simply arrange meetings with the committee to present more in-depth picture and discuss on how we can work together to improve the work of city probation officers and supervisors and receive appropriate amount of funding so that we can perform our duties efficiently and effectively. Most importantly, our salaries must be restructured to reach the pay in 5.5 years and must be adjusted in parity with the peace officers such as corrections, police officers, and sheriffs. I thank you and I apologize.
No worries. Thank you. Just about your request, we can't meet as a committee in closed doors because of open meetings law, but I'm happy to meet with you as chair of the committee to discuss.
So I'll give my card.
Yes, you can give it to my staff after the hearing.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, committee chair. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Kyle Simmons. I have been the president of the New York City Laborers Union Local 924 since December 2021. It's an entry-level prevailing rate title into the construction industry. And you heard from these distinguished panelists in reference to their credentials behind it, their positions that they hold. I'm a firm believer it has nothing to do with credentials, educational backgrounds, and things of that nature. It's a systemic pattern to keep people of a certain race and gender economically down. The reason why I come to that conclusion a long time ago, because in my title, as an entry level into the prevailing rate, my members come in at $75,760 a year. It's a labor class title. There is no formal education required, no experience necessary for these positions. The city of New York in the construction industry have approximately 14,000 skilled trades members. So you can have an understanding what laborers do. You have to look at the hospital setting. The doctors are the skilled tradesmen. The skilled tradesmen are the doctors, the plumbers, the carpenters, the electricians. The laborers are the nurses. We are the support staff to help these individuals. My membership, because there is no competitive examination, is a very appointed position. Each and every one of y'all could be appointed to these positions easily. Why is there only 450 laborers, support staff? Besides the other duties we know the nurses do, the laborers got other responsibilities they could do under the prevailing rate statute also. Besides that, if you got 14,000 skilled tradesmen that is mostly white male, and the salaries that you may say that these laborers come in at $75,000, these individuals are making well close to $100,000 and more. They make $10 to $15 more an hour than a laborer makes. Either they're doing unskilled work and receiving these benefits that they're not supposed to receive of doing unskilled work, and they look a certain way. And when you only have 450 laborers that are the support group for these individuals, who's doing all the work and what do they look like? And it goes beyond that because they're looking at promotional opportunities. When I look at it as a whole, is giving the individuals the correct titles in the first place based upon the work that they are actually doing, not what it says on the paper, because they may say they're doing janitorial work, what in fact their assistant is the plumber, the electrician, or the carpenter. And they're receiving less wages than they are supposed to receive. And what do they look like? When you look around at agencies, let's look at the Parks Department. Our union was founded there in 1945. To this day, there's not one laborer in there, yet they still have the skilled trades force working in there. So who is performing those duties and what do they look like? And how much are they being underpaid? Beyond that, it has to do with who is supervising these individuals. As a laborer, I'm fighting these battles right now. How they have secretaries of no knowledge of the construction industry giving laborers their responsibilities of work to do. You have police officers giving laborers responsibilities to do. But in these other trades, they use the right supervision, they're in the right meetings to do their trades. I have in NYCHA, I'm fighting with them right now. Out of the 450 laborers that are in my group right now, 250 of them was just hired between 2018 and today. And the only reason why they are there is because the federal monitor had made them hire the support group that is there. In homeless services, they got 20-something laborers in there, but not one of them are assisting the 80 skilled tradesmen they have employed in there. So they're not giving them the opportunity to actually learn the trade. Yes, they're making plenty of money. But when they're assigning them to janitorial duties like cleaning toilets, people of color we're talking about, they're assigning them to traditional duties that came out of the days when there was slavery and the Jim Crow rules and regulations. They don't see us as working class of individuals, no matter how much education you may have. They will continue to low grade you in a different category when it comes down to the work. These rules have been in place for the longest time, and if it wasn't for the local law 18 where y'all can do your investigation, they never fixed any of this. Until this day, they still haven't really fixed anything. They come up here and they tell you a lot of stuff, and it looks really good on paper. But the actual, what is being done is not really there. Now, I work for the Department of Environmental Protection Agency. And when they was looking to diversify it and give opportunities to individuals, and they says, oh, we went and we gave tests for the sewage treatment workers, the construction laborers. You got to take a test for all of that. Yes, they pay a little bit more than the laborers make. But I says, why never you offer the opportunity for the city laborers position? Because you are a public utility. You're supposed to be paying prevailing wages for these type of jobs, and you hear crickets. There is never a response to, it's a labor class title. It's an appointed position. After 1 year, you become permanent. No formal education, no experience necessary. It's on-the-job training. It's an opportunity.
Mr. Simmons, can we ask that you give the committee, I don't know if you have in writing some of the information that you're sharing with us? We'd love to follow up, but we're short on time just because, you know, we're going over the clock. I'd like to follow up with you on this specific matter and see if we can come to a place where we can reconcile some of what's been going on in your industry specifically. I don't know if you have your testimony written. If not, you can submit to us 72 hours after up until 72 hours after the hearing. So I'll give you the email address for that, and if you could get that to us, I'd also appreciate meeting with you offline. Is that okay?
That'll be fine. I was just told about this hearing.
No, I appreciate it.
And I came in out of the fly.
Yeah.
You know, no written testimony, but I can write something up for your committee to look at.
Thank you. The email address is testimony@council.nyc.gov, and we'll give it to you in writing right after this. I do have a question for EMS. What would be the most helpful in aiding workers to break the pattern of low bargaining trends that you referenced in your testimony, in your opinion?
Well, right now, like I said, we have an EEOC determination that ruled that the FDNY has been discriminatory in their pay practices and treatment of EMS. So instead of having the city of New York, like I know they're walking out, but 1180 went through many years of fighting a very similar discrimination lawsuit. It would be helpful if they don't decide to send us to court for the next 15 years and actually listen to what the recommendation from EEO was and utilize that as a break from the pattern, and also take a look at the Neisner decision, because they went to arbitration and the arbitrator awarded a higher than pattern because of COVID and because of the medical field. So I believe after the past 3 years, 4 years that my members have been, working literally to death. We have 11 people have committed suicide since COVID. We've had multiple COVID-related deaths. So to simply prove that our members showed up during a major pandemic when everybody, and I was doing council hearings from Zooms and a lot of people still working from home, our members showed up. So it's time to stop the games, look at the lawsuit, look at the Neisner decision, and come to the table with a significant offer that's above pattern. So that would be the help.
Chairs, you all have any questions? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna ask my staff to get the contact information so that we can have separate meetings offline. I'm looking forward to continuing to dive deeper into the separate issues here at the table.
I just want to tell you, we have
Yes.
an I'm sick.
It's
We have an
okay.
EEOC case pending too with the same attorney as 1180 and you guys too. So we're going through the same exact thing.
Great, thank you so much. And Kiana, my staff, will follow up. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all who came here to share your thoughts and experiences today. If there is anyone in chamber who wishes to speak but has not yet had an opportunity to do so, please raise your hand and fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms in the back of the room. Seeing no hands in chamber, we will now shift to Zoom testimony. Beverly Newfield, please begin your testimony when the Sergeant at Arms indicates that you may begin.
You may begin.
Thank you so much. This has really been a fascinating, can you hear me? Just wanna
Yes,
make
we
sure.
can,
Thank
Beverly.
you. This has really been a fascinating hearing, and I've sat through the whole thing, and I'm really glad I did. So much wonderful information. I want to thank the committee chairs for the seriousness of the way you're handling this. Also, DCAS, the data team, CWA, certainly the Mayor's Office of Equity, all important players in making pay equity happen in New York City. I'm Bev Neufeld, founder and president of Power New York. I think some of you know me. I've been before the council before, most recently about the salary transparency bill, which is now law and which we will seek to improve with Intro 808 later on this year. Local Law 18 put New York City on the map in terms of the fight for gender and racial equity in the United States. And with the requirement to evaluate the workforce and to create transparency. But the goal was not just to do that. The goal was to fix disparities. And once again, New York City Council is breaking ground by using the data to address disparities with concrete actions. I congratulate you. I believe the bills that are being introduced will address some of the root causes of the racial and gender discrimination. I've been working on this now for 20 years, and I'm really thrilled to see these concrete actions. One of the greatest causes, as you recognize, is occupational segregation. Councilmember De La Rosa, your bill on career development will be very helpful. I will, with my testimony, offer another example of how pathways of equity are being created for women that has been led by the Institute for Women's Policy Research. They looked at actual skill sets and saw how they could be adjusted to better paying jobs. Workplace culture is
Time
addressed
expired.
by Council Member Hudson, and I think that is really important. Please do try to get feedback on programs that could be solutions that that people will be able to share, like childcare accessibility. Opportunity equity is now considered one of the key issues in the international community to create pay equity. The European directive is requiring this information, and it's considered so important. Please do not undervalue one piece that was discussed, which is the devaluing of the work that women do. Caregiving work mostly done by women of color. That's one of the biggest reasons that you pointed out, the huge gap for Black women is because it's almost 100% Black women and women of color doing this work. So there's a way to evaluate it, and I want to say that Commissioner Sherman is addressing that through equal pay for work of equal value analysis, and I can only tell you that will be an important solution. Council Member Williams, you mentioned contractors, a huge issue. I hope we can talk more about that. New York City government is a role model for the country, but it's a role model for the private sector. We call on the private sector to analyze, address disparities, set goals, close the wage gap. It's exactly what you were doing. You were standing up doing it, and we hope that other cities will. And the private sector will as well. I will offer you also, with my testimony, a fact sheet that was handed out at a recent event that the speaker spoke at about pay equity, and I will share that with you as well. Thank you so much for hearing this, and also really thank you for these important solutions.
Thank you so much, Beverly, for your leadership, and Power Her for all you've done throughout the years and continue to do to uplift not only women, but all of us here in the city. So we are appreciative. Any questions? Okay. Great, thank you so much. If you're currently on Zoom and wish to speak but not yet had the opportunity to do so, please use the raise hand function and our staff will unmute you. Seeing no hands, we're going to conclude. I want to note that everyone can submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. To conclude, I would like to first thank our co-chairs, Chairs Williams and Lewis, who have joined me today to express the council's dedication to improving pay equity in our city's workforce, as well as to all the staff who have helped prepare this hearing. In addition, we would like to take a moment to express thanks to all of our interested advocates, organized labor, and everyone who testified and attended today's hearing. Thank you so much for the work that you do, and with that, this hearing is now concluded.